Christmas.
Good evening and welcome to the August 13th, 2018 meeting of the Shawnee City Council. I'd ask you please silence your electronic devices at this time. I am Mayor Michelle Dissler. I'll be chairing this meeting. I'll do a roll call at this time. Councilmember Zimmerman.
Present.
Councilmember Neighbor.
Present.
Councilmember Jenkins.
Present.
Councilmember Kimling.
Present.
Councilmember Meyer.
Present.
Councilmember Adrian.
Present.
Councilmember Sandifer.
Present.
Councilmember Constance.
Present.
Thank you. We have some scouts in the back that are going to come up front and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. Come on. Okay, when you're ready. To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. If you'd like to turn around and introduce yourselves to everyone, please. Thank you very much. Next, I'll explain our procedures for public input. During the meeting, I'll offer the opportunity for public input. If you'd like to speak to the council at any of those times, please come forward to the microphone. I'll ask you to state your name and address for the record, and you may offer your comments. So that members of the audience can hear your comments, I would ask that you speak directly into the microphone. By policy, comments are limited to 5 minutes, and no person may speak more than twice to any one agenda item. After you're finished, please sign the form on the podium to ensure we have an accurate record of your name and address. In addition, while we won't do a roll call vote on every vote, I will state council members' names who vote in minority so that our listening audience will have a clear and accurate record of the vote. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Does anyone have an item they would like to remove from the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve. Second.
Motion has been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item is mayor's items, and I do not have anything tonight. Next item is business from the floor. Is there anyone who has comments on an issue that is not on tonight's agenda? Please come forward, state your name and address for the record. There at the podium.
My name is David King. I live at 13411 West 71st Street. I'm ready? Mm-hmm. What I want to speak on is remotely directed to the agenda, but I was the victim. Do you want the things to hand out? I've got handouts. In fact, there's more than enough, so I'd like to have the extra ones back. I'm here to let it be known that we were victimized by a previous development, and there's nothing I can do at this point because I pursued this with the council or the city on many occasions with no success. But I thought I would speak to help somebody in the future that may have this same thing, and I think on the agenda that may be something they'll face. I have been a resident of Shawnee for 40 years. We live on a kind of an acreage. Excuse me while I put my glasses on. I'd like to describe the area since we've been there. When we moved at that corner, Flum Road was a gravel road. Fairway Hills was a cow pasture, and 71st Street was a narrow two-lane road with grass ditches on both sides of it. And that is kind of the essence. The impact of rains in those days was very minimal because most of the area was grass, and water sinks in grass. Well, as you can imagine, what's happened over the years, the grass has turned into asphalt. The city has grown, and growth is good, but I don't think it should be at the expense of existing residents, which is what this particular development was. And we're feeling the expense of it at this present time. Roofs, driveways, streets, gutters, drain basins, collector pipe drains, and main pipe. I'm basically talking about 71st Street. When that was done, a whole new stormwater system was developed. In addition, the same time Fairway Hills was built, there's the northern part of theirs drains into this same system. All these rooftops, driveways, gutters, drain basins, all these things empty into a main sewer that comes down 71st Street. And when I describe this to people, they say, I can't believe this. All of this stuff dumps into my yard. And my yard has absolutely no provisions to handle all that velocity. And you who have handouts will notice the velocity and the volume that comes out of that sewer into my yard is fantastic. I have expenses galore that I have to do. I've even asked the city on occasion to help because the water comes from their system, and they say, no thanks, that's your problem. It's in your yard, so you take care of it. Well, my attitude is, how'd you get in my yard? You developed a system that dumped it in my yard. Now, I know you have to have a stormwater system, but you need to take into account where it goes. And when you put it onto a private property, it tears it up. It's so obvious because I have no provisions for it at all. Over the years, I have tried to make some amendments because it was tearing up my yard. I had a big tree that fell on the house because the root system had been destroyed, fell on my house. And I have a 150-year-old cottonwood tree that was about to go. So I took a project there to put in a big stone wall and filled in with dirt to where I could protect that tree. I think the tree is protected. Again, I asked the city, would you help? No, thanks. That's your problem. So my view is the city has a total careless attitude when they damage private property. I have to say that because I am an example of that. They damaged my property, would not donate a penny. They did make a riprap improvement, but that isn't the problem. So I would like for, especially the people in Fairway, who may be recipients of a similar problem, but I don't want that thing up the hill generating more water coming down into my yard. I don't know what you can do about it because I've been to the city on many occasions, and the city just says, I don't care. Well, that's what I got to say. And if the city has any conscience, my code of ethics says, if I damage somebody's property, I will fix it. The city says if we damage it, you fix it. That's all I got to say.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Is there anyone who has comments on an issue that is not on tonight's agenda? Okay. Next item is public items. Item number 1 is to consider contract number 2018-0086, a Shawnee Entrepreneurial and Economic Development Agreement with Tevis Architectural Group, PA. Pursuant to policy, Tevis Architectural Group, PA has requested to be considered for the lease assistance program in the amount of $60,858. The business intends to relocate their office to the Staggs Creek office building at 10820 Shawnee Mission Parkway. Recommended action is to consider approving and authorizing the mayor to sign the contract. Is there any discussion from the council? Anyone from the audience that would like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion has been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Councilmember Kimling voting in dissent. Item number 2 is to conduct a public hearing to consider adopting the 2018 revised budget. The 2018 revised budget was published in compliance with the 10-day Kansas statutory notice requirements. There are 3 actions needed on this item. The first is to conduct a public hearing. Following public comments, I'll ask for the motion to close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, we will have council discussion. I will accept a motion to conduct a public hearing on the 2018 revised budget.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We are now in a public hearing. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, the second action is to close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The public hearing is closed. The third recommended action is to adopt the 2018 revised budget. Is there any discussion from the council? I will accept a motion.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 3 is to conduct a public hearing to consider adopting the 2019 budget. After several public budget meetings at the July 23, 2018 City Council meeting, the council voted to publish a maximum tax levy amount of $24,602,289 and no change to the estimated mill levy. There are 3 recommended actions required. The first is to conduct a public hearing. Following public comments, I will ask for a motion to close the public hearing. Once the public hearing is closed, we will have council discussion. I will accept a motion to conduct a public hearing for the 2019 budget.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We are now in a public hearing. This is a formal public hearing required by law. Staff has put together a video summarizing the proposed 2019 budget. Is there... Play the video.
Every year, the City of Shawnee develops a budget that aims to provide quality public services every day. Here's a breakdown of what the 2019 budget looks like. A little more than 89% of our general operating revenue comes from taxes, including property, sales, and franchise taxes. The other money comes from revenues like licenses, permits, and fines. A resident in the Shawnee Mission School District has 23% of their total tax payment go to support the city. 46% supports USD 512, 22% to Johnson County government, 8% to Johnson County Community College, and 1% to the state of Kansas. A resident in the DeSoto School District has 20% of their total tax payment go to support the city. 52% supports USD 232, 20% to Johnson County government, 7% to Johnson County Community College, and 1% to the state of Kansas. How does the revenue in Shawnee get spent? A majority of the revenue, 40 cents of every dollar, goes towards public safety. 33 cents goes to public works, 13 cents goes to general operations, 8 cents goes to parks and recreation, and 6 cents goes to community development. The City of Shawnee is financially secure. For example, in 2018, Shawnee received a AA1 bond rating from Moody's Investor Services for its general obligation bonds. Achieving this rating gives the city access to lower interest rates, saving money for taxpayers. Officials use proceeds from the general obligation bonds to construct municipal facilities and complete citywide street and stormwater projects. The City Council approves balanced or surplus budgets in all funds, and the proposed 2019 total city budget is $79.3 million. This budget is made up of funds that include the general operating, stormwater utility, special highway, public safety, and debt service funds. The total 2019 budget adds more than 4 additional city staff members, including 2 additional staff in the police department and 1 additional staff member in the fire department. Shawnee continues to deliver high-quality services for residents' tax dollars at a great value. We do this by serving more residents per employee than our neighboring communities. City staff and the City Council take the responsibility of handling the financial resources of the city very seriously. This annual budget guides the city's plan for providing the services, facilities, and needed infrastructure that continues to make Shawnee the best place to live. For more details and information on the city's budget, please visit our website.
Okay, is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to this item? Seeing none, the second action is to close the public hearing. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. The public hearing is closed. Third action is to adopt the 2019 budget. Is there any discussion from the council? Mr. Kimling and then Mr. Jenkins.
Norman, the minority here, because we've already discussed this item before. But the reason I won't be supporting the budget tonight is because I was really hoping with increased revenue this year that we could have lowered the mill levy, which we just recently had to increase. So that's why I'll be opposing it.
Mr. Jenkins?
Stole my thunder. I was going to say almost exactly the same thing. As you can recollect, when we talked about the 5 mil increase we did for the fire station, we had funds come available from the county sales tax that would have covered that. I really felt strongly we should give that 5 mil levy back to the taxpayers, and I was in obvious disagreement with the rest of the so can't support the budget because of that, so I'm going to vote no on it as well.
Thank you. Any other comments from the council? I'll accept a motion.
Move to
Move
approve.
for approval.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Mr. Jenkins and Mr. Kimling voting in dissent. Item number 4 is to consider contract number 2018-0087, a cooperative agreement for fiscal year 2018 Local Edward Byrne Memorial Justice Assistant Grant, JAG funds. The cities of Shawnee, Overland Park, and Olathe are applying jointly for this grant, and Olathe will be a lead agency. The police department expects to be awarded $12,509 and intends to use the grant to purchase equipment to expand the capabilities of the Community Outreach Relations and Engagement Unit. The recommended action is consider approving and authorizing the mayor to sign the agreement. Is there any discussion from the council? Anyone from the audience that would like to speak to this item? I'll accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. And our core program is an excellent program. The next item on the agenda is items from the Planning Commission meeting of July 6, 2018. Item number 1 is to consider ordinance number 3231Z031807, rezoning from single-family residential to planned single-family for Kenneth Estates located in the 12400 to 12900 blocks of West 71st Street. On July 16, 2018, the Planning Commission recommended 10-0 that the governing body approve Z031807, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report, and ordinance is required. A valid protest petition has been received by the city clerk and includes signatures by the owners of 24.5% of the land located within 200 feet of the boundaries of the property to be rezoned, less street right-of-way. Since the 20% threshold has been met, there are 3 actions that may be taken by the governing body. You can approve the recommendation of the Planning Commission with 7 votes, override the recommendation of the Planning Commission with 6 votes, return the recommendation to the Planning Commission for further consideration of specific items with a majority of those present and voting. The recommended action is to consider passing ordinance number 3231. I think we have a short presentation by Community Development Director Paul Chaffee.
The property is located on the south side of West 71st Street in the 12400 to 12900 blocks. The 60.46 acre tract is the location of a portion of the former Kenneth Smith Golf Course, a single-family residential structure, and outbuildings related to the golf club manufacturing operation. Other portions of the approximately 180-acre golf course property have been developed as Fairway Hills Single Family Residential Subdivision and Good Shepherd Catholic Church. The site also contains 3 ponds and large areas of open fields. An overhead power line crosses the northeast corner of the site, and the southern portion of the property contains a creek and wooded open space. The subject property has been zoned R1 since 2004. Property to the west is zoned planned single family and has been developed as Fairway Hills Single Family Residential Subdivision. Property to the north across 71st Street is zoned R1 and has been developed as the Windsor Subdivision and single-family homes on unplatted lots. Property to the east is zoned PD, Planned Development, which was a precursor zoning district to the planned single-family and has been developed as Hampton Court Subdivision, a single-family residential and duplex development. Property to the southeast is zoned R1 and is adjacent to 4 lots in Westminster Place Subdivision, RS Residential Suburban as Good Shepherd Catholic Church, and as single-family homes on an unplatted parcel of land, and PSF, developed as a portion of the Fairway Hills subdivision. The land use guide of the comprehensive plan indicates the site is appropriate for low-density residential development. The applicant has submitted a preliminary plat for a single-family residential subdivision, which was considered by the Planning Commission, that provides a gross density of 1.52 dwelling units per acre. The rezoning request is in compliance with the land use plan and surrounding platted subdivisions have densities between 2.01 and 3.6 dwelling units per acre. The applicant intends to develop the property as a single-family residential subdivision. It is the intent to retain the existing single-family home on a lot unless it is found that the uninhabited house cannot be rehabilitated. The character of the neighborhood will not significantly change as a result of the rezoning. This is the infill site and the remaining undeveloped portion of a property that has already been developed with single-family residential homes, with the exception of Good Shepherd Catholic Church on 75th Street. Surrounding properties have been developed with single-family homes. The zoning request is for the same zoning district as Fairway Hills to the west and south, and planned development zoning to the east in Hampton Woods, although most of the lots in that subdivision are significantly smaller. Denial of the rezoning request will not appear to benefit the health, safety, welfare of the community. The planned single-family zoning district provides an opportunity to efficiently develop a property which has large areas to be retained as open space, streamway corridors, and ponds. Members of staff, as well as engineers from Phelps Engineering, met this morning to review the comments from a GBA stormwater study and comments regarding traffic in the area. Staff reminds the governing body that last summer and fall, the requirements for submittal for preliminary plans regarding plats and site plans were modified to not require as detailed information as provided in the past. The request was undertaken to bring our requirements more in line with other cities at the preliminary stage of development. The level of detail required at the preliminary stage remains enough to render an opinion as to the effect a development will have on subject and surrounding properties. The applicant has submitted the information as required for such a review. Final plats will come at a later date when the final plans will come as a later date when final plat is submitted. Staff will review the final plans at that time, and these plans are more detailed in nature. Regardless of what the engineer identifies regarding traffic and stormwater does not impact the rezoning, it will be addressed at a later time. The applicant submitted a preliminary stormwater report for review by the city's private development engineering staff. At this point, the study provides the information to determine the 2 things that we look for. 1, the rate of post-development flow does not exceed pre-development, and whether or not detention is required. The study found that there is flooding currently downstream on Blackfish Parkway, and detention was required. Staff doesn't feel the information is incorrect, but provided using a different modeling tool. Staff and the developer's engineer acknowledged that the design of the 74th Street Richards could be modified for a location of a sump. As far as traffic goes, the traffic engineer did not require a traffic study since the total trip generation was less than 100 cars in the peak hour. The street design serves as a traffic calming with curves and on-street parking allowed in residential streets. Speed bumps are not an effective means of traffic calming. The proposed Richards is most likely to not be used as a shortcut since it provides a longer route than existing conditions. As required, when considering a rezoning to the planned single-family zoning district, the applicant submits sample elevations of homes that may be constructed in the subdivision. The applicant has provided examples of the type of home to be constructed. in order to provide a variety of design in the planned single-family district, no greater than 20% of the homes can have the same facade. A valid protest petition has been received by the city clerk. Signatures by the owners of 24.5% of the land located within 200 feet of the boundaries of the property to be rezoned less street of right-of-way are on the petitions. Since the 20% threshold has been met, the mayor has indicated to you the options you have regarding an action on this plat. Upon due consideration of the evidence presented, the Planning Commission voted 10-0 to recommend approval of Z03-1007 rezoning from R1 Single Family Residential to PSF Planned Single Family for a 60.46 acre parcel of land in the 12400 to 12900 blocks of West 71st Street for single family residential development subject to the conditions listed in the staff report. That concludes my short presentation.
Thank you, Paul. And the developer is here. Did you want to add anything? Please come up and.
Good evening, Mayor Disler, members of the council. My name is Jeffrey Alpert with the Alpert Companies, LP. Our address is 4601 College Boulevard, Leawood, Kansas. Since this is our first project in the city of Shawnee, let me give you just a real quick background on our company. We were actually formed by my father in 1961. I joined the business in '73, and 4 years ago, my son became the third generation of our family to be in our company. Our development activities have always been primarily within the Kansas City metropolitan area. We've done a variety of different kinds of real estate development. Our philosophy for development is to find a great piece of property and do what we believe to be the best thing for that property. In that regard, we have developed residential subdivisions such as Quail Valley in Overland Park, the Hawthorne community at 119th between Rowe and Knoll, also in Overland Park, the Woods Villas and Estates, 120 home site development in Leawood. We've done retail, including Hawthorne Plaza at 119th and Rowe, which is the Overland Park corner. We've done mixed-use projects, including probably the best known is Park Place, which is a mixed-use community at 117th between Rowe and Knoll. That project includes about 350,000 feet of office, including the AMC Theater's headquarters. We have 125,000 feet of retail. We currently have 177 apartments in operation, with another 122 beginning construction. And then we also have one hotel in operation with a second one that should be coming soon. Our most recent project is that we're involved in is the Fairways at City Center in Lenexa. It's an 80-unit attached villa development in the middle of a golf course, and it actually is for lease, not for sale. So with that in mind, when the Kenneth Smith site was brought to our attention, we jumped on it because it, in fact, was and is a great piece of property. The terrain is beautiful. It's beautiful from a physical standpoint, but it also has the unique historic character that really makes it special. You know, the history of Kenneth Smith and how he became a golf club manufacturer many years ago in the 30s and 40s, and built a business in Shawnee that became world renowned. It's a great story, and it deserves to be told and somehow memorialized by doing the right thing with the site that he built on. built his business on. So we believe we're doing the best thing for that property with our 92 home sites. We intend to take advantage of the ponds. We intend to keep 2 of the 3 ponds, the eastern pond and the central pond. The western one is really too small to be of much value, but it will be an open space that the homeowners who live there will enjoy. We expect to retain the Smith residence. We think it has great potential to be renovated into a modern, livable residence, but keeping the character of the structure in order to become a salute to the Smith family and what they did. I do want to mention a couple of other things. We do have knowledge of some environmental issues on the site that I'm sure you probably are all aware of in some manner. We have done extensive testing on the site. We have had meetings with KDHE, the Kansas Department of Health and Environment. We intend to bring the site up to standards that are more than suitable for residential living, and that is built into our development plan. So with that, I would like to ask Judd Clausen with PEI, our civil engineer, to talk a little bit about the stormwater issue. I'd also like to talk a little bit about traffic. There's been discussion about 74th Street and doing some traffic calming there. We're looking into that. Some issues with the 72nd Street cul-de-sac that we are looking at reconfiguring to make it a little more comfortable for the neighbors to the west. And before I bring Judd up, I just want to introduce the other members of our development team who are here tonight. My son Jeremy with our company, Judd Clausen and Doug Uben with PEI, and John Groby is here tonight, who will be directing our marketing effort. And he also gets credit for bringing the property to our attention as a former Shawnee resident. He would tell you that he has been watching the property for many years and is very excited for the opportunity to bring some homeowners to the site who can enjoy it the way he and many people in Shawnee have for many years. So with that, I'll bring Judd up, and then if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jeff. As Jeff mentioned, my name is Judd Clausen. I'm with PEI, Phelps Engineering, civil engineers, land surveyors for the projects. I wanted to make a few remarks regarding the stormwater. There's been a lot of questions about that. There were questions at the Planning Commission, and there's been questions as just of recent as well. So I wanted to give you some insight on that going forward. As Paul had mentioned in his report, we had prepared a preliminary stormwater management plan for the Kenneth Estates development. And submitted that with our applications as customary. The plan uses the current approved stormwater design standards as set forth by APWA, which is American Public Works Association, and the City of Shawnee's requirements. The report, as Paul had mentioned as well, denotes that downstream flooding at Blackfish Parkway occurs. And therefore, the findings are that detention would be required by the development to address that. Detention has been provided on the proposed site in the 2 ponds, the middle pond and the eastern pond. With the addition of this project, there'll be significant upgrades to the embankment, the storage capacity, the outlet works for each of these 2 ponds. The preliminary design that we submitted will detain the proposed flow rates to less than the existing conditions on that site for the 1, the 10, and the 100-year storms. All 3 storms were required to be looked at as part of the requirements. And to be clear, detention is being provided and it is in accordance with the city's adopted standards. Now, we understand that one of the neighbors has retained a second opinion from another engineering company of the findings of our report. So I'd like to take this opportunity to address a couple of those items to answer some questions. We received this documented letter from staff last Friday. One of the comments in the second opinion letter was a comparison between the downstream flow rates from our study and the 2003 county floodplain model. Okay. The differences in the downstream discharge rates from our study to the 2003 county flood study are the result of the use of the current approved design parameters set forth by APWA and the city's criteria, which differ from the engineering design parameters in the 2003 study. In other words, things have changed some in 15 years. These changes include items such as time of concentration due to differences in methodology in used HADI calculated, updated NRCS hydrologic soil groups. Soil types have been reclassified in some instances. Additionally, the 2003 model accounts for attenuation of stormwater runoff in the form of detention ponds, embankments, and stream channel volume within its study. Now, we recognize that the 2003 county model has different flow rates than the APWA model criteria used today, and that was pointed out in the letter. However, numbers from one model should not be used to compare numbers from the other model and vice versa. That is like comparing apples and oranges. It is important to look at the input values, the methodologies, and the results of each model by itself. And our modeling findings done under the APWA and city criteria indicate that the detention we have provided will reduce the proposed runoff rate downstream to that of under the existing conditions. Now, that said, we recognize the concern from the neighbors about the existing 2003 model and how does that relate. So that said, during final design, in order to satisfy the concern of differences between the two different models, we propose to analyze the detention being provided in the ponds using the same modeling program, assumptions, input variables, and analysis used in the 2003 Johnson County flood study. The results will show that the detention provided on the proposed site will reduce the proposed runoff rates downstream to that under the existing conditions in that particular model with the completion of the final plat. Also, additionally, Paul had also mentioned it, the road connection in generally this area, as this all comes downstream here. We are going to look at that as the final plans to make sure that we don't send too much water down that street. Obviously, we have to have storm sewers and overflow swales, things like that. And one way to solve that is introducing a sump in that location to solve that. So we agree with that. And again, I just wanted to offer that input as you go forward and evaluate our application. And we're here for questions.
Thank you. Is any, Mr. Jenkins?
Yeah, just a question on the 2003 study as opposed to the APW study. What was the difference between the two in, say, cubic feet per second or whatever that you were dealing with?
I can.
I mean, I'm kind of getting the feeling that the 2003 study shows more runoff than the newer study.
Actually, our model shows higher flows. And that's because, those of you may be familiar with stormwater design in the last 15 years, it seems like we've had a lot of 100-year storms or 50-year storms, seems like every other year or so. And the hydrologists and the scientists and the engineers who have looked at that have determined that, to try to better calibrate things, some adjustments have been made in those runoff models. And so over 15 years, you can imagine that sometimes some parameters change. And so the flows in our model were generally higher than in the 2003 models for those three reasons primarily those three reasons I just mentioned. For the 100-year, the flow rate at the point of discharge, and the point of discharge was analyzed as this point near the southwest corner of the site. Generally, the site has two tribs that come in from the north here, and then a more significant trib, which is about 2/3 of the drainage coming in from the east. It confluences together and leaves the site at the southwest corner here, which that was the point of interest, is what is leaving the site. Our analysis indicated that during the 100-year storm, the existing flow was 3,072 cubic feet per second. Our model indicated that with detention, that could be dropped to 2,797 cubic feet per second, or a difference of about 9% drop. Again, that's with the detention in it. The Johnson County watershed study showed about 1844 and 1854 existing and full development conditions combined. And so that's a difference of about 1,228 CFS. Again, there's a lot of variables that go into this, and so your models today are generally a little higher than the models yesterday or 15 years ago. Not to say that they're either is wrong, just to have different input variables and different ways of looking at it.
Well, is it changes primarily from the hydrology or different rainfall
It's
parameters?
it's the same type 2 distribution, 24-hour storm. It's just differences in the time of concentration, your curve numbers. The model itself, the 2003 model, had built-in attenuation within the stream for storage itself, so that sometimes tends to lower the actual Qs that are in that stream. There's a lot of engineering differences here, but what I'm trying to leave you with is looking at the model that we've prepared, which staff has analyzed, and the indications are that detention does do its job in this case and helps out with not only providing for this development, but meeting or lowering the existing flow after it's done. And like I said, we understand that concern and needing to calibrate that to the 2003 model, and that's something that we can do some more engineering analysis on as we approach into final design.
So based on the detention that you're going to put in place, it's actually going to reduce the outflow?
That's what our indications are, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions from the council? Councilmember Constance. Ms. Lindsay?
So has your team done any similar projects on topographically challenging pieces of land with flooding? What is your track record in dealing with that? I mean, I know you've been in business for a long time. Do you have any other examples that you can share to maybe, help us know that you know what you're doing?
Exactly. Well, we've been in business for 30 years. My partner Harold started the company in 1990 on doing residential subdivisions. And it continues to be a very strong part of our market. We've done many developments within Shawnee, both with detention and not detention. I think staff can document that we have done several residential style projects within the city of Shawnee, as well as all over Johnson County, Overland Park, Leawood, Olathe, Spring Hill, metropolitan areas. So doing this for over 30 years, you see quite a bit.
Any other questions or comments from the council? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anyone from the audience that would like to speak to this item? Please come forward. State your name and address for the record.
David King, 13411 West 71st Street. My short question is, will any water from the new proposal here be released to 71st Street and go west down to 71st Street? The back of the houses on the northern part of it theoretically could release to 71st Street, is the reason I'm asking this. In other words, I got enough water, I don't want any more. Do you know the answer to that?
Falls to the south, sir.
Everything. Nothing will enter into 71st Street.
Nothing that doesn't already enter there today. If there's something that enters there
Okay.
today,
Okay.
it's still gonna go there.
Okay. Well, I wish you had done the project on 71st Street.
Is there anyone else from the audience that would like to speak to this item? Please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Hi, my name is Mike Schmitz. I live at 13021 West 74th Street. And I've lived in Shawnee for 10 years now. I had the misfortune to move to 74th Street last year. You know, one of the major reasons was because it was a quiet and closed street. And, you know, I didn't know that there was going to be a planned through street at that location. You know, the city or the municipal code provides that if the city plans to put a through street somewhere, they're supposed to put a sign up that says that's their plan. There's no sign on that at that location right now. I haven't got a good explanation of why, other than apologize it wasn't there. And so, you know, I recognize that, you know, being on 74th Street, it's a relatively small number of people that are, I would say, the most directly impacted negatively by this development, both with having the street go through as well as I back up to the stream that with the stormwater issues that everyone's concerned about. So because of those things, I realize that it's, you know, maybe it's good for the overall community. I actually am, you know, very pleased with how the developer has, you know, responded to concerns, and I think the overall project is a very good one. I just want to make sure that before we get too far down the road, we, you know, if good starts here, let's make sure we start it with a good plan in place, and that we have the data to know that it will be, that it is a good plan, that everything is, you know, public safety is protected, that the impacts on our properties are going to be mitigated to the best that they can. And so, you know, I'd like to see whatever steps that can be reasonably taken to eliminate or reduce these impacts be taken. You know, it was mentioned earlier that the city requires a traffic study when there's 100 or more vehicle trips during a peak hour. The estimate here was 95. And it does not take into account any potential cut-through traffic. It also is based on a national average of, I believe it was about 130 nationwide surveys throughout the nation. And I think that it's very reasonable to expect that a subdivision of mostly 3-car garages might be a little higher than what the national average is for those. So one of the things I'm requesting is that that a traffic study be performed to show how the traffic will be affected both on our street as well as where most of that traffic that would pass by our street would let out, which is at Hauser and Blackfish Parkway. I think that from my personal experience, that already backs up sometimes in the morning, and we're talking about almost doubling the amount of traffic that was likely to go through there. So I'd like to see that analyzed with data as opposed to just opinions about, well, we think it'll be okay. I'd like to see some data that supports that and can speak to how much of the impact is expected to be. And also traffic calming was also mentioned, and that was one of the stipulations that was put in the Planning Commission approval, was that the developer work with city staff to see if they can have some traffic calming measures implemented. And I commend the developer for already working on that. I've had a conversation myself with them about some of the things they're at least thinking about doing. And I'm asking that the city council basically lend their voice also to say that we also think that that's a good idea. Not that you're requiring it, but that if it makes sense to do, if it's reasonable to ask that to be put in, to go ahead and have that be done, and to share that you would also feel that way, that makes sense. Just trying to think. So I guess I would close by saying that, you know, a couple of these things are not, you know, required under city ordinance, perhaps, the traffic study and the traffic calming measures. They may not be required to be done, but there's several other things that are also not required to be done that we're granting the developer. So such as putting the utilities in the front yard, or for variances of different kinds, when he makes a reasonable request and it makes sense to do it, you give them those variances. And basically all I'm asking is that you give the citizens those same considerations when we have reasonable requests to meet those as well. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Sandifer?
Yes, and I have to agree with Mike. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask for a traffic study when we're talking about a 5-car difference. I mean, if there's a possibility that we could do that, just to give them the numbers, because there's several people that have asked for that, and also on the traffic calming, it is, hearing that the developer is already stepping up to try to work with that I applaud you. I mean, that's great, working with the citizens, and our job is to be liaisons between the city and them and you, and we'd like to do a good job of it, So would we. But thank you for your help, and we'd like to make a good working relationship. I think your project is a good project.
Councilmember Meyer?
Yeah, I would just weigh in and concur with Councilmember Sandifer. I think a traffic study seems reasonable. I know a part of where we are today is about a year ago, we started looking at ways that we could revamp our development process and maybe get some of these projects to council more quickly so there is less investment at the front end. I think we still are kind of working on what that balance is going to be, because I want to make sure that we're able to kind of streamline where we were, but also provide enough information that residents in the affected areas feel comfortable and confident with what that's going to look like. So I think as we're navigating those waters, it feels like we still have a little bit of work left to do, because I feel like from what I've heard from folks, I have questions about the traffic count, and I don't doubt it looks like a fantastic development, so I'm excited for it to come to Shawnee. I just have some continuing concerns about both the traffic and the stormwater, and I feel like if there's a way that we can provide some certainty to residents before we move forward with that, I think that's going to be the best for everyone involved.
Anyone else from the audience like to come speak? State your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Brownie Simpson, and I live at 7209 Noland. And I just want to talk a little bit about the just kind of 8 factors, golden factors that are kind of considered in these things. And I'm going to talk about the extent to which removal of the restrictions will detrimentally affect nearby property, and I guess I'm referring to the R1 suburban. The property is currently zoned R1, which I think is adequate. It was changed, I think back in 2006 or 7. My thought is the city should only allow development of R1, since the planned single family is so much more dense than the residential suburban designation, which has been there for over 50 years. We moved in 2001, and we back up to the property, and we were kind of told at the time that it would never be developed, and we had this beautiful golf course view, and we paid a premium for that beautiful golf course view. Well, I guess if I bought that theory at the time, but I did expect at some point this would be developed. I didn't know how it would be developed. The land use guide changing this in the comprehensive plan has only been done recently. When you take out the areas that cannot be developed, which is the southern part right there, I think it, in my estimation, and I mean that it creates a more dense piece of property. Some of the homes are going to have the side lots are only 7 feet apart, which is kind of small amount of property. We looked at a lot of subdivisions, some in Lennox, some in other places, tried to stay within the 435 loop to move, and then decided that we love Fairway Hills and we didn't want to move then. And because a lot of the new developments, the housing was very close and very tight together. And but a development using PSF lacks adequate side yards. That type of plan will cause a hardship for us, and we hope that the developer will allow us to maybe buy the lot behind us. But I've got some neighbors that it's going to be, the side of the house is going to be 7 feet off of our existing fence line back there. So as you look out of your back window, you're looking at the side of somebody's house is basically what you're looking at. I know the depth is, I think, 30 feet possibly, but I don't know think the sides are 7 foot. Anyway, I just feel it should be left R1 suburban. And planned single family is twice as dense as residential suburban, which is more development than the golf course itself. Zoning of R1 is better for us, less impactful on our home values since we are losing open space. So we've been looking at this space, anybody in Shawnee, for 50 years now. And I just want to make sure that development is going to be done in the right way, and that when we look back there, that our property values aren't going to drop. So thank you very much.
Appreciate your comments. Thank you. Mr. Chaffee, can you address the 7 feet?
I'll address the 7 feet, and also the land use guide hasn't been amended for this property for years and years and years. It's always been shown as low-density residential, so I just wanted to clarify that. Planned single family allows for 7-foot side yards. R1 allows for 7-foot side yards, but it's 20% of the width of the lot. So if the lot's 75 feet wide, one side yard can be 7, the other would then be 8. So that's a little bit of the difference between the R1 and the planned single family. Also want to make sure that everyone fully understands that Fairway Hills subdivision is also zoned planned single family and has those same side yard, front yard requirements. So that's sort of where the 7-foot side yard comes from, is from those regulations. The side yard backing onto a backyard of someone else, probably I'm an example to use. My side yard backs onto the rear yard of 2 of my neighbors. Although on my lot, I played with the size of my home and pulled it a little bit further from the backyards of folks, so I'm actually closer on the side than the other. So that's not necessarily an uncommon situation. I think there are a couple of those situations in Fairway Hills that are that way too, where the side yard is the front yard. I know over in Wedgewood up at where 72nd Street comes off of Cottonwood, the houses front onto Cottonwood, or front onto 72nd Street, but then the house right behind them fronts onto Cottonwood. So they're sort of in the same situation where you have the side yard with the rear yard. So it's not something that's uncommon.
Thank you. And if traffic engineer Kevin Manning can come up and address the, oh, there you are. For some reason, I thought you were further in the back. And address the traffic issue, please.
Mr. Powell, can you turn on the projector, please? Projector. Yep, sorry. Okay, I know there's a lot of concern about traffic on this project, so I just wanted to take some time and give the council a little more insight as to how those decisions are made, whether or not to include a traffic study. There's been some discussion that kind of 100 vehicles in the peak hours are standard, and that some residents are concerned this could generate more than that. But this is basically a sheet. What I'm showing here is kind of how that number is generated, and this is out of the IT Trip Generation Manual, 10th edition. And what you can see here is there's about 190 studies that go into this, and the average rate for single-family detached housing in the peak hour between 4 and 6 p.m. is about 1 vehicle per unit. So when we're talking about the west side of the development, we're talking about 45 homes. We can expect about 45 vehicles in the PM peak hour. You also see here on the right, our standard deviation is about 0.3, and your standard deviations in your bell curve, the odds of something basically being 2 standard deviations outside the mean, that would be about 1.6 vehicles per unit, are about 2.5%. So if we take those 45 trips that an average development would generate, and even if we take something that's on the 97.5% of the highest trips we would expect it to be generated, we would be looking at about 72 total vehicles coming out of the west side of the development. That's not including the middle and the east side. Of those 72 total vehicles, there's only 2 ways for them to go in and out. They can either go north to 71st Street or south onto 74th Street to the new connection. If we just assume for sake of argument that 70% of those vehicles, which I think is very conservative, I think it'll be closer to a 50-50 split, or maybe even more towards the north, but just for sake of argument, 70% of those vehicles go to the south, you're talking 50 total extra trips in the PM peak hour. So about, of those 50, probably about 35 will be entering, probably about 15 will be exiting. So that kind of gives you a scope at the 97.5% of the highest trip generation, and if 70% of those vehicles are going to the south, that's the amount of vehicles we're looking in there. So when I talk about not requiring a traffic study, that's kind of the worst case scenario. So when I look at that and I say you're talking about 50 extra trips, I'm comfortable not requiring a traffic study. If the council prefers to require one, that's certainly a prerogative, but that's just kind of my mindset going into this whole project. That's during the peak hour, that's correct, not during the entire day.
An hour, in 1 hour?
So in general, as a rule of thumb, the PM peak hour is about 10% of the total daily traffic. And so if we're talking about an extra 50 trips in the peak hour, now that's, once again, a very high example. You could be talking about 500 trips over the course of a day, which I usually describe from like 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. is about 960 minutes. And so if you're adding another 500 vehicles, you're talking about one every 2 minutes.
So an additional vehicle?
That's correct. And then once again, that's in the high end, like 97.5% of traffic generation.
For the record, that was Councilmember Constance. Does any other council members have any questions? Thank you. Anyone else from the audience like to please come forward and name and address for the record?
My name is Mark Holmstrom. My address is 7202 Nolan Road, and I live right here. And I've lived in Fairway Hills since 2004, and the extent to which the removal of the R1 to the planned single family how that will, I believe, detrimentally impact Fairway Hills is more to the traffic. If you look at the single point of southern entrance and egress for the subdivision, it's right here. And here is the turn to come up here. So I don't know if only the west side of this subdivision will be using that or not. There's 92 homes. I think 2 cars per home, that's 180 cars. The whole subdivision may use that whole ingress, egress. I think there's some criteria there that it's being, I just want to present what the worst case scenario possibly could be instead of what some of the criteria that the gentleman before me used. But from this area right here to this area right here, if you've ever been there, that's 110 paces. And right here, there is a swimming pool. And right here, Fairway Hills children that go to Good Shepherd traverse that to and from school. So you're talking about a very condensed area where that right turn has to be made to go up to the subdivision and come down, turn left, and go down to Blackfish. So to the extent that my concern, I'd share a lot with what Mr. Schmidt said in terms of the traffic that's coming in there. So to the extent that we could do a traffic study just to make sure that everybody has an idea of what practically that looks like for this particular piece of property, I think that just makes perfect sense to do that. The developer has known about these concerns for quite a long time, and to the extent why the developer didn't engage in own independent study, I can't answer, but some of these prevailing issues have been out there for a while now, and you would think they'd say if it wasn't such a problem, we would have done a study and we wouldn't have to be dealing with this right now, or there would have been something that would have been done or proposed to alleviate these concerns. So that's really all I had that I wanted to share with the council, that my children live here and my children's well-being and safety is paramount to me, and they go that little stretch 2 times a day. And in the pool, and in the summertime, they're at the pool all the time. So I want to make sure that they're safe. And just as a corollary, as a side note, where that pool is, right here, unfortunately, we have a lot of people that don't live in Fairway Hills that come down and park in the pool parking lot, and they line both sides of the street waiting for their own kids to come down from Good Shepherd to climb in their cars so they can take them outside of Fairway Hills. So I don't think that's probably addressed in any traffic study, but that's a practical problem that we have there as well. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, but that's all I have.
Councilmember Adrian?
I would like to note that 45 homes would be accessing this spot right here. Looking at the plot map,
Okay.
Only 45 of the 92
Okay.
homes. So,
Perfect. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Somewhere to plug in. Excuse me while I get set up. I got a couple things to present. If I could plug in somewhere, Steve, here's a. Thank you. While he's doing that, I'm Gene Russell. And hopefully I'll be able to show a little bit more practically. But as a comment, I'm here as a representative for the board at Fairway Hills Homes Association. I do live in the development. The comment was made, an individual hired an engineer. Fairway Hills Homes hired an engineer because of some of the concerns. And related to the study, there's a number of neighbors in Fairway Hills as well that are concerned about the cut-through traffic at Hauser. They'd actually would prefer 74th Street go through because it would alleviate some of their traffic. We've got quite a bit of traffic. If we had the diagram back up there, that's the last way to come through to avoid Flum. And the concern is 74th Street coming through, there'll be a lot of traffic through the developer's development. So it goes both ways. There are some neighbors, as Mr. Holmstrom was saying, that want to see the alleviated. I think the concern is right at Hauser and Blackfish. So I wanted to add that to what both Mike Schmidt and Mark Holmstrom had said. And this isn't projecting, I'm not sure why. Maybe it will. Is there a way to get this up? Yay. The smartest guy in the room. Great. So while he's doing that, I think this is less about, I addressed the city council in a note, and I want to make sure to present that, Mayor Disler, for the record, both the email that I sent as well as this memo. So that can be shared as a public record. This is a study from George Butler as well as that email that I sent. I've been a resident of Fairway Hills since I became a resident of Shawnee. I moved in. I think we were the second lot that was purchased at Fairway Hills. At the time, I didn't know anything about a lot of the issues that I'm going to talk about today, other than to check, because I was close to a stream, to make sure that my property was not in the floodplain. So if I can put this in presentation mode, I do have Paul Miller from George Butler here. The reason why we were working with George Butler is there's some history associated with this in the development, and it goes back to a lot of the things that happened within the city of Shawnee, pipes and parks, some of the money that we got, and a lot of the development. And if I could, I don't know, I think I can present this. In 2000, I moved in 1999, and in 2002, I guess I can't go back and forth. There were 41 developments in Shawnee. Oh, there it is. There's 41 developments in Shawnee, and I can't really zoom in, but I can point right here, down at the bottom, number 41 here, that's Fairway Hills in 2002. So you can see quite a bit of development was going on, and that was just in advance of a lot of the new requirements for the city of Shawnee and for all Johnson County cities. And I think if you go back, I pulled this out of the 2007 Public Works meeting notice. There's quite a bit that was going on, and I think I got a copy for each of the city council if you want to pass these out. This is the adoption of the comprehensive stormwater management plan. And that was from a March 2007 Public Works meeting in minutes when we first launched into a lot of the work that we're doing on stormwater management. So the point I want to make here in advance of this is when the development was first proposed to go from a golf course from residential suburban to R1 was in 2006, and we were just getting started in 2007 to update the comprehensive stormwater management program in the city of Shawnee. So you can see there's quite a bit of regulations that we were trying to adopt and incorporate. A lot of it goes to the funding, and what I want to talk about then is, and I don't think this is an engineer versus an engineer issue. If you can switch back over. I do want to talk about what we ended up with. I sent with each one of you this weekend the updated FEMA maps that resulted from a Mill Creek study that was started in 1999 and culminated in 2003, and it was used for the FEMA mapping in 2009. So that's the reason why I sent you the FEMA maps. That FEMA map is used for the current existing conditions. So I think there's no difference in what Mr. Clausen said. I think you said 12,227. 1,228, and that's the same number here in
We'll
the
need a
different.
motion to extend the time.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to extend Mr. Russell's time. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Go ahead.
Apologize for that. I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. But there's no difference in the numbers than what we're talking about. There might be a little bit difference in the model. What we're talking about, though, is if you see the middle line, that's the existing conditions from 2003, and then we're looking at fully developed conditions. So if you look currently, this is at the very end of Blackfish. Blackfish at the culvert, that's right behind the pool in Fairway Hills, has 538 acres of water. This is only a 60-acre development. But at 60 acres, it's currently a golf course. And in the Mill Creek study that Phelps Engineering was a part of, it's only rated at 10% impervious area coming into the stream. Even with only 10%, even as a golf course, there's a couple of neighbors that has the water coming up to their property line. That's 538 acres from upstream. The gentleman was here talking about 71st Street. All that water is coming through that culvert. There's 346 acres coming from Seven Hills Lake. The FEMA line starts right now at Flum. But in actuality, FEMA regulates whenever you have 640 acres. So the FEMA line really should start at right after Blackfish. And I made a comment to Carol Gonzalez in 2009 when public comments were asked for. Are there any comments from citizens? And I said, yes, the FEMA line should be here. I talked to Mike Gregory, who's recently retired, about the difference in where they established the line. And we knew that it would impact some of the neighbors there. So the point I'm trying to make here is, yes, there's a release date. Yes, there's been changes. Yes, when you develop, there's going to be stormwater runoff. Yes, Phelps Engineering is a good engineering company. They're part of the Mill Creek study. They'll manage some of the water. What we didn't see, though, was how they were going to do it, how they were going to analyze that. And that's the only thing I was trying to state is there needs to be a more comprehensive study. If you look at these numbers, they're not even within 10%. If you look at the Phelps existing condition of 3,072 cubic feet per second, that's how much water is moving. They can't go any higher than 1,844 cubic feet per second, or we're going to have a FEMA issue. And we've talked about maybe we need to work together. Fairway Hills has a detention facility. This is not just a simple mathematical model. There's a lot of computation that's involved. It's very comprehensive, which is why we got a certified floodplain manager who is also a professional engineer, just to give us a quick view. Not just what Gene thinks, What's your engineering assessment? And again, this is not against Phelps. They had a good study. What I wanted to talk to is the culvert is the limitation. Once exceeded, it'll overtop. It overtops now. And the FEMA mapping says it can't go any higher. And there's no plan right now in place in the zoning action or in the Phelps study to say how we're going to get there. In fact, I think that there's a little bit of disconnect between our floodplain manager of the city, the city engineer, and I'm not sure that that's the case. I just haven't had the time for the discussion yet. All we're asking for is a delay in the action so we can have those discussions, so we can map it out, so we know what the impact is. If we need to give a little bit from Fairway Hills detention, we're glad to do that if we understand what we're going to get in return. 3 points there. The current property has a 10% impervious area. We were shown before an R1 designation of 86 homes, and now we're going to 92 homes. On the east side, the planned single family is a lot more dense on the east side, and that's going directly into the creek. A lot of where they have planned these detention facilities are in the middle and top, and all of the high dense areas on the east side are going right in the creek. So that's got to be changed, and I'm sure they can do it, but I'm not sure what the impact is. They haven't shown the plan to help us understand. With so much water coming, we're just asking for an update to get closer to the FEMA conditions that they can't exceed. And the delay, they're not going to change what they're doing now. They're going to continue to work on their development. They've got a lot of things that need to work out. We just want to make sure that before we have the zoning action, maybe they need to keep it at R1. He's got a good development in a lot of different places. They're good engineers. I'm just asking for delay so we can get the plan of how this is going to be resolved instead of just leaving it up to the it's good enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this item?
I guess I don't mind leaving my.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
The presentation.
My name is Ksenia Black. I live at 12323 West 71st Street, at the corner of 71st and Canaan. I've been there for 14 years. Been a resident of Shawnee since 96, however long that is. 22, I guess. My concern is a more fundamental concern. And that is, why are we doing this? Everybody in this room is agreed that this is a great property. Everybody in this room has agreed it's a beautiful property. Why are we putting 92 homes on it? We're destroying the beauty of that property. I understand that growth is good. I know of plenty of people who have moved into the area because of that golf course and because of the view. So we're going to put in 92 more, basically cookie cutter homes. For what? Where are those kids going to go to school? Are they going to be crossing 71st Street, which is going to have more traffic? You've got 2, 3 garage houses. Don't tell me it's only one car per house that's going to be going back and forth in peak traffic. These houses are very expensive. That means they are 2-income homes. That's 2 cars at least. I don't understand the point. I know the property's been sitting empty. Refurbishing the main house sounds very good. But building the 92 homes around it, how is that honoring Kenneth Smith? I don't see that it's honoring the history of this place at all. The history is a big part of Shawnee. We need to figure out how to honor that. I'd love to see it made into a park. I have had a conversation with Councilwoman Constance. That's too expensive. I get that. But we've got to figure out a way of honoring the history of Shawnee without just having yet another development.
Thank you for your comments. Mr. Sandifer.
When the Kenneth Smith property was becoming available, I was involved with Mr. Brown, the real estate attorney, and I was trying to make a legacy for Kenneth Smith by trying to see what we could do to acquire all the equipment and everything that Kenneth Smith had. It was all still laying there, just like when they closed the doors. I had a tour of it. And he was not interested in building a legacy for Mr. Kenneth Smith. He was interested in building funds. That's all he was interested in. So I was trying to get a legacy going at that period of time. And it did not come to fruition because the one in charge of the Kenneth Smith Foundation was not willing to work with anybody. As of this time, the city can't afford to buy that and make a park out of it. We just can't do it. And we can't tell a developer or somebody that owns a piece of, that's like if you owned this piece of property and you came up to us and said, I want to sell this piece of property. This is my retirement now. I need to sell it, and I'm going to sell it to a developer. He wants to build some houses on it. And we say, no, there's some neighbors that don't want any houses on it. What would you say to us?
That sounds very much like a homeowners association that does that sort of thing all the time.
Okay, but my point is,
we can't have.
right, we can't have that. But my point is, we can't tell them that you can't develop this piece of property. All we could do is guide them and try to get the best development that we could possibly get in there that will not have that will actually have the least amount of impact on anybody. You know, if Mrs. Smith would have died many years ago, this would have been mute because this would be developed. But she didn't, and so now we have to deal with it. And at some period of time, it is going to develop. Now, the only thing we could do is try to be the guidance of it and get the best that we can get.
Thank you. Is there any other comments from the audience? You could please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
Yes, Leo Nunnick. My address is 7309 Cana Lake Road, Shawnee. I've lived in Shawnee for my entire life, many generations in the city. And I can appreciate the value, the sentimental value, the emotional value of this property. My dad worked there for 40 years. Mickey Sandifer just pointed out the exact reason why that's not possible. The city cannot afford to make this a park. It is privately owned. We have a quality developer here that's willing to put in a good project. And if we sit here and we continue to push this back, as Mr. Russell has requested, developers such as him will say, thanks, but no thanks. And we're going to sit here with another property, another project, another year, 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now. Excuse me, I should be addressing the council, I'm sorry. That is probably going to be less desirable in all likelihood. The people live in Fairway Hills. What if the people that were opposed to you guys moving in when you bought your house? No, you have a great subdivision. We have a great subdivision. And to continue to do this is deteriorating the value of that subdivision. It's deteriorating the value of that property. There's vandalism that goes on that property all the time. I think anybody in the city would acknowledge that. And when you have that much property sitting vacant in the middle of the city, this is not, we're not talking way out west in an area we don't want sprawl. I'm opposed to sprawl as well. But this is in the middle of Shawnee, in the heart of Shawnee. It is going to be developed. It is private land. The fact that that street dead ends into that property would tell nobody that that was not going to be developed. You could hope, sure. You can think maybe that in 30 years I'm no longer living there that it gets developed. but the reality that it's not the case. I appreciate Mr. Sandifer's, Councilman Sandifer's comment about, assuming you said the owner's representative, 1990 or 2000, whenever that was. Like it or not, private property is meant to be developed. They have every right to do that, as he stated. So, you know, I walked up there the other day, saw about a dozen deer in that property. Yeah, it was hard to look at and say that's not going to be probably possible maybe. But it's not reality, folks. It's not reality, and that's what we have to deal with. We have to understand that we got to get the best deal we can get. And I would hope and appreciate that this council, as much as this is a challenge, we have to look at the city as a whole. You can't look at a handful of neighbors that it's in their backyard, I get it, that don't want the development to happen. Would I like to look at a golf course in my backyard or a former golf course, now just a huge weed patch, every day? Well, not in the state that it is in right now. 30 years ago, yeah, it would have been fine. I played golf on that many a time. I've driven up and down 71st Street more than probably most people in this room combined. There's no traffic on that street. Traffic study, fine. If the city wants to do that, proves that there's not an issue, that's great. So at the end of the day, I understand a lot of your points. I get it. But I really would appreciate the city's support on getting this property developed, because otherwise it's going to be sitting there for many more years. And be careful what you wish for.
Thank you for your comments.
I don't think that a, quote, handful of neighbors' opinion should be discounted because there are only a handful of neighbors. Development does happen. Yes, it is going to happen, yes, but let's do this in the right way. And doing this because it's the best deal possible sounds a lot like we're doing this just for the money. No.
Sure. You get one more time to speak.
I'll keep it very brief. I don't have a bunch of master's degrees, so I'm getting nothing out of this. So that I take that as a personal shot. I do not appreciate that comment at all.
I meant it again.
No, you meant it as you said it.
I meant it against what you said.
Anyone else from the audience like to come forward? Seeing none, I will accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
A motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 2 is to consider ordinance number 3232, amending Title 17 zoning of the Shawnee Municipal Code regarding the R1 overlay district. On July 16, 2018, Planning Commission recommended 10-0 that the proposed text amendments regarding the expansion of the R1 overlay zoning district be approved. The ordinance is required. The recommended action is to consider passing ordinance number 3232. Is there any discussion from the council? Mr. Neighbor.
Yes, I think it's a good idea to move forward with this, and somewhere in all this paper I've got. But I would, I'll vote for this one here, but I think there's some areas, Shawnee Mission Parkway along to 47th Street and 47th Street to 51st Terrace should be candidates for there because they fit in, thank you. Yeah, here we go. They fit into, seem to be the criteria, and I think that going forward, we could expand that and more people take advantage of it.
Mr. Jenkins?
Yes, I just want to point out to the folks here in the audience, this is a zoning hearing. We're looking at rezoning the property. The developer still, when he comes forward with his proposal to actually build the subdivision, he comes up with his subdivision plans and needs the approval of the council for that. Many of these items that have been discussed have to be determined in much greater detail. The engineers will finish up much more detailed engineering studies. Traffic will be further analyzed. There's be a lot more chances for input. This is a zoning hearing, and to deny zoning based upon some of the comments that were made really just doesn't even make sense at this point. And I'm very much in favor of, I'm very supportive of citizens. I think I have a track record of that. But right now, we're looking at zoning this property, because once we do the zoning, that gives really the developer the chance to say, yes, it's now possible to move forward with this. Now I'm going to invest the money to go out and do the additional analysis of stuff. We'll bring it back. And of course, it's got to fit. If it doesn't fit, it doesn't get approved. And they know that. So they'll be working with the council, they'll be working with the planning department, the public works department, and everybody to make sure the project works. If it doesn't work, it doesn't get approved. So right now, we're looking at just changing the zoning on the property right now. I think it's actually a better change in zoning. If you look at the densities are actually less in the surrounding area by substantial. So this is a pretty nice development. If you live there, wow, we're not talking about apartment complexes, we're not talking about duplexes, we're talking about some very nice homes that are on significant sized lots, and that's pretty darn good considering what could be going in there.
Any other council comments on the zoning overlay district?
No, we're on 2.
I think we're on a different,
Yeah,
So I
we're
think the
item
vote
number
was to
2.
close the public hearing.
Correct, so we
And
haven't,
so we're still
right,
on
we're
the
still on this,
rezoning.
yeah.
Council comment.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So I think
we haven't
we're
moved on to the next
We're in
item.
a discussion at this point, I think.
something got missed.
Oh, I'm missing.
We're
a
still
page.
on 1.
Okay.
We're in discussion.
We're still in
council discussion.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm missing a page.
I was gonna say, that was very,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's no much related.
Yeah, right.
Ms. Meyer and then
Okay.
Mr. Sandifer.
Sure, yeah, I'm glad now we're on the same page. I was confused too. I would just echo a little bit of what Councilmember Jenkins said. I do think that there are some concerns, and as I said previously, we're working through kind of a different development process right now, and I really think there's a balance that we can hit. I think it's a great project. I would like to see it come forward. I think that the issues, by and large, that the folks who live there have are issues that you're going to have great answers to. I just worry about moving forward without having those answers for folks so they can feel a little bit more at ease that these issues will be remediated for them.
Mr. Sandifer?
And I feel the same way, and I don't see why we can't go ahead and perform a traffic study on this and give them that much and see what we can do.
If I can, I'm sorry, I got to interrupt you for a second. I'm a little confused procedurally as to where we are. There is no public hearing held by the governing body on a consideration of a zoning application. It's the recommendation from the Planning Commission. I understood and wrote down the motion as to approve the zoning. Is that not what our elected officials understood their vote to be?
That's what it's supposed to be.
That was my understanding.
It's
It's zoning.
And so if I'm looking at the faces correctly on the council, then there's all of the elected officials that are present tonight thought that they had just voted on an ordinance to approve the zoning recommendation of the Planning Commission. Is that correct?
Well, so that would be my question, because we've had a conversation about perhaps a traffic study. Maybe are we talking about delaying it a little bit so we can get some stormwater?
I don't want to delay it.
Well, the traffic study would theoretically
Well, I'm
delay
saying
it.
just to give them numbers, not to delay it.
So we're going to approve it before we find out what the traffic study says?
We
That's
have a
fine,
good
I'm just
idea.
trying to clarify
We have
what
a
the
good
point.
idea.
Well, I agree that it's, but are we going to move, what would be the point of a traffic study if we're approving it before we find out what the traffic study says? I guess is
The
my
approval
question.
tonight is of the rezoning, so there's still opportunity if you want to do these
Sure.
things later. It was for strictly just the rezoning at this point.
Mayor, if I can jump in real quick, the motion that I have for that item to approve the rezoning for the Kenneth Estates was made by Councilmember Jenkins, seconded by Councilmember Zimmerman, and was unanimously approved.
Passed 8-0. That's
Yes.
what my notes indicate. So the zoning was approved.
Okay,
So then we are on
number 2.
item number 2. Okay, so I'm not missing a page.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought I was missing my mind for a minute.
Well, I kind of wondered why we kept talking about it after we voted, but I thought I was missing a page. Item number 2 is to consider ordinance number 3232, amending Title 17 zoning of the Shawnee Municipal Code regarding the R1 overlay district. On July 16, 2018, the Planning Commission recommended 10-0 that the proposed text amendments regarding the expansion of the R1 overlay zoning district be approved. An ordinance is required. The recommended action is to consider passing ordinance number 3232. So, Mr. Neighbor, your comments were regarding this item, right?
That is correct.
Thank you. So, is there any other items from discussion from the council on item number 2? Mr. Jenkins.
Just a brief discussion. This came before the Downtown Partnership Council, and it was discussed by all those members and forwarded to the council for their action, so that we have strong approval from the business folks downtown.
Thank you for those comments. Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
So move to approve.
Second. Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is staff items. Item number 1 is to consider ordinance number 3233, amending Title 9 of the Shawnee Municipal Code by incorporating by reference the 2018 Uniform Public Offense Code. The city has incorporated the Uniform Public Offense Code, UPOC, published by the League of Kansas Municipalities, into the Shawnee Municipal Code, SMC. The UPOC is designed to provide a comprehensive public offense ordinance for Kansas cities and in large part parallels the state criminal code. Staff is proposing provisions to Title IX of the SMC be consistent with the 2018 Uniform Public Offense Code and state law. An ordinance is required. The recommended action is to consider ordinance number 3233. Is there any discussion from the council? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Next item on the agenda is miscellaneous items. Item number 1 is to ratify the semi-monthly claims for August 13th, 2018 in the amount of $2,700,125.22. Is there any discussion from the council? Anyone from the audience like to speak to this item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded on this item. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Item number 2 is miscellaneous council items. Does anyone on the council have an item they would like to discuss? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. We are adjourned. Thank you.
How does the